Hello everyone, and we're going to pick up where we left off. Technically this is going to be video 2 for digital painting, and what I want to show today is just how you can use the tools provided that was shown in the last video with something a little bit practical. Now what I have here is a apple that I was able to get a little bit of a picture of. Now ideally, if you do have access to two screens, that would be fantastic, whether it's going to be this or maybe using your phone or a tablet or something like that. But if you don't have access to two screens, I'm going to show you another method that you can use to basically see your reference, this is what we're going to be focusing on while you paint. Now, one thing we're going to do now is we're going to take a moment to just get rid of some of the shapes that we have here. Similar to what we've done before, we can select our layers and just get rid of them. We really don't need them. So, boom, gone. And the way that I would start something like this is I would get the general shape first. So try to get the red similar to what I have over there. Again, one thing that could help is just get the base red like what I have over here and just try and replicate this. So I'm going to try and get kind of a middle ground between the darker red and the lighter reds that we're seeing here. I think this needs to be a little bit darker. Yeah, there we go. And we can always change this up as we go, of course. So what I could do now, again, this is only if you do not have a stylus and Wacom. I would actually take this moment to either use the Curvature Tool or the Pen Tool. I'll leave that up to your prerogative. Make myself a new layer just to be safe. And I'm just going to click and drag around here. Undo that. There we go. And the nice thing about using the Curvature Tool is if I need to make adjustments and changes, this lets me do that very easily and keep it roundish too. Of course, I'm going to want to turn off the stroke here. Yep, that looks really nice. And again, I just want everyone to get more used to doing digital painting. Now, what I'm doing here is more optional, but if you want a little bit of practice before the real thing, I would strongly recommend you work on something like this. Just work on one object so you can get the general gist of how the pen tool works, and then give it a try yourself. Remember, you might have to undo a lot. Remember, Control, Command Z is your friend. I say Control because that's Windows. Command, that's Apple. Speaking of which, yeah, so the hardest part in this is to really see how your shape is going, because right now I can definitely see that this area is a little bit too high. Definitely could bring this down a little bit. And again, just try to get as close as you can. Don't try and trace. I want to try and wean everyone off of tracing because that was basically used so that everyone could get used to the tools. Now we basically take off the training wheels and actually try and ride that bike, so to speak. Okay, so well, that looks pretty good, at least for what I'm looking for. So I can just hit return, and I can move on to the next step. Now, if I want to, I could even go further with this, but I'm just going to leave this way for now. Eventually, I will want to paint this, so I'm going to actually take this opportunity to rasterize this layer. This I'm leaving as optional. Because again, if you want to add some stuff later or just change the shape a little bit, you still can do that, but I'll leave that up to you. Okay, so that's my first shape. So I'm going to actually go in here, call this main apple. So I know that's my main body. Now I'm going to also make a shape specifically for the actual green area that I have over here, and also an area specifically for the twig and the leaf. So this is where it's going to get a little bit tricky, and also one of the reasons why having the ability to use the pen tool and then afterwards another tool can be quite helpful for us. So again, just click and drag, and I'm just getting the general shape just to get started. And let's see, getting rid of that. And for the stroke, once again, I am seeing if I could actually get the CMYK to get started with this. Perfect. Although, we will want to actually darken that up a little bit. It's one of the nice things about having the swatches. It can give you a good starting point for what you need. And in this case, I'm going to, let's see here. That definitely does not need to be quite that bright, so I'm going to darken that up a little bit. Of course, it helps if you actually select it. Interesting. Oh, actually, here we go. There we are. Sometimes you have to change the color here and then just fill that in here. Or again, you could just go to this this little switch over here, and that'll fix it as well. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Oh, by the way, if you ever have to, don't be afraid to zoom in once you have the general shape. Perfect. Okay. Now this is a different layer entirely, which is, in this case, is kind of a good thing. So I'm going to rasterize the layer, and I could use some of the tools I have along with me. So I'm going to switch this smudge from what I have here to just general brush. I think that should actually work out quite nicely. And I'm trying to mimic the shape of what I have here. Again, if you use the smudge and you use the very edge of your brush, it gets a very unique kind of look to it. Probably hearing the clicking a lot. That's perfectly fine. And sometimes if you feel that you could use it, you could even go in here and just use some of the brushes we have and just make your own adjustments when necessary. So, now there we go. I can use the smudge and to kind of bring out that area just a smidge more, bring this up. Cool. Of course, if I want to keep on making some other details like that, I might need to turn down my brush size. And just take a quick look at this. Yeah. And do this like so. Now, my objective is not so much to finish this because that would take a while, but I do want to at least get us in a situation that I can at least have a good starting point for those who want to basically get a little practice before the real deal. The hard part in this kind of thing, of course, is the fact that you have to look at this kind of stuff, so I can already see that some of these areas are going to have to go down a lot to make this work better. I'm going to keep the green and the red as separate as possible. One of the hardest parts about this, I have to admit myself, is having that patience to do what's necessary. Okay, so this is actually a pretty good start, so I'm going to call this apple green. I'm going to make a shape specifically that's similar to that of a twig. Again, I'm going to go to my pen tool. And I'm going to make a new layer just to be safe. Okay, so at least that could be a good start for us. And I'm going to just turn off my stroke again. Bam. Definitely need to change this to more of a brown color. I could always put more green elements to there later. Okay, that looks close to what I was looking for. And again, if you need some more details, you could always add that in. There we are. I'll change that into a corner. There we are. Fantastic. And of course I could add more details as we progress. But I just want to get the general gist of this. Eventually I will put maybe a little bit of a green tint to this with some of the tools that we have. But that's not too shabby, I think. Okay. And then I'm going to add a bit of a leaf. Oh, but I'm going to, of course, rasterize this. Again, it's up to you if you want to rasterize it now or later, but usually don't tend to put this stuff off. And again, I'm going to rename this stem. I just put that as steam. There we go. Okay. Well, the next part, we have a bit of a conundrum on our hands. We have to decide whether or not we just want to make this whole thing the one shape, or if we want to make it two. A little bit darker green for the part that touches the stem, and a little bit lighter for the other part. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this whole as one, because I can always add a lighter tint to these areas over here. And I think that would actually make this look pretty nice. So I'm going to bring this back a little bit. Going to observe this. And again, I'm going to try to, to the best of my ability, replicate what I'm seeing. And again, if it's not 100% perfect, this is, again, a chance to kind of practice with this first before the real deal. So I'm going to click and click there, click and drag, and give this area a quick click. Click and drag, click and drag. This area is going to get a little weird for a while, but that's okay. So that stem is pretty thin. But it seems like it's going the way I want it to. And of course, once that's relatively done, I can take away the stroke for the stem. Very cool. And just make adjustments and changes where necessary. Again, just take your time. Do your best. And again, this is just a recommended warm-up, just so you can get an idea of how this could be approached. But a bit of a heads up, if you really get good with the tablet and stylus, if you're able to acquire one, of course, it does make this process way faster. But sometimes we might be in situations where we have to keep on moving and working despite what we have. So at the very least, if you've got the software, you can pretty much still keep at it. Now, there we go. So I'm pretty happy with that mostly. Just think I need to make this a little bit thinner. There we are. Fantastic. And of course, I'm going to take a moment to rasterize this and rename this leaf. Okay. Now, as I said before, I just want to show you some basic elements on how you can make adjustments and changes to this. Now, I'm going to do a lot of additive elements to kind of make this come alive a little bit nicer, and so on. Now, I'm going to try and add this on via different layers, just to see how this is going to look. So I think the first area that I'm going to add a little bit of change to is going to be some of the highlights. So now what I can do for this is I can use the Eyedropper Tool. This is going to be a factor that's going to come up later, so it's good to get used to this now. And you can get there by hitting the I button, or just go to the eyedropper that's over here. What I'm going to do after this is I'm going to go to my saturation, and I'm going to take this down a little bit. The reason why I'm doing this is I want to try and add a little bit of a highlight, similar to what I see over here. And once that's done, I'm going to lower a layer. I'm going to make a new layer, and eventually I'm going to rename that something. But for now, I'm going to go to my paintbrush option. Should be right here. This is one of the reasons why using the painting preset can be really helpful for this kind of stuff. But anyways, I want to basically make this a little bit bigger. I do want to change the hardness to a higher amount too. I'm going to put that to 25%. And again, I'm just going to try and replicate what I'm seeing. And if it doesn't come out the first time, again, Control-Z is your friend. Okay, and if you feel that it could use a little bit more of a fall-off effect, you could also take a moment to go to Filter, Blur, and go to Gaussian Blur. Very similar to what we did with Illustrator before. Let's have that go out a little bit more. Oop, that's way too much. And I can paint in here as well. There we are. So that looks actually, it's not too shabby. And I could keep on working with this as well over here. Just a heads up, it might go a little bit overboard, but that's okay. One of the reasons why we have a eraser option. But it's also one of the reasons why I like using different layers too. This is one of many different directions you can give a shot to. And if it works, fantastic. And if it doesn't, well, that's one of the reasons why we have the eraser option. All right, that's not bad. Okay. So I'm going to take a moment to use the eraser, get rid of anything that's unnecessary. Oop. Sometimes doing this in chunks can be helpful. Oop, there we go. Excellent. And by the way I'm getting this brush again is I'm right-clicking, turning the brush size down a little bit. Oop, way too much. And turn down that hardness. Something you'll see right over here, if you haven't seen it, I'm just going to mention it now, is the smaller it is, the less of a fall off you're going to get. So keep that in mind when you're working with this. But I think a little bit of a smudge can help. It's still a little strong, but we have a couple ways that we can work with this. Fantastic. Okay, so that's basically, again, where we're just going to be for now. Just going to fix up a couple things. By the way, if you're ever in a situation where you need to focus on just one area, you could always use the lasso tool in an area and then just go to town. The best way to approach this is probably using a mask. Similar technique we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, that little smudge tool that's over here looks like a little finger. Kind of helpful when you're doing certain things. Okay, so just some last things I need to wrap up. There we are. Okay, now I could do the same thing to just basically darken up an area. So I am going to just go to town on this, darken this area up a little bit more, similar to my apple that we have over here. And yeah, so basically go into my original red. Again, the eyedropper tool, or just hitting I, will get you here. And then once I'm to the actual spot itself, I'm going to go to the darker area and just turn that down. Now the previous layer, I'm going to change this to Apple Highlight. And I'm going to put the darker area below this. So I'm going to call this Apple Dark. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go too crazy with this because I want to make sure that I just give you a start. I don't go and so on. Yeah, there we go. This is again why using multiple layers can be helpful. Yeah, that actually should work. So again, I'm just trying to follow the pattern of the apple itself. And down here, there's a little bit of a shadow to it, so I'm going to darken that up a little bit more. And I'm just going to keep it on the same layer. Now this area is going to change a lot once we get to that spot, but at least there's a little bit of a difference. And I'm using the smudge to kind of mix in these areas together. The way that I'm doing this, and I'm going to illustrate this a little bit nicer a little bit later, is I'm taking the bottom section of my brush where the actual spot is and just push up as bare minimal as possible. I'm just doing it the same way over here. If you go back and forth like this, you can actually blend these two areas together in a nice way. Now there's other ways to blend colors, which I'm going to show a little bit later. But for now, I am going to erase what's unnecessary, which is going to be a lot of this. Now again, I'd recommend doing it chunk by chunk. It looks like I might need to actually lighten that up a little bit, but what I have here is okay. And I'm just erasing what's unnecessary. Cool. All right, so the last part that I just want to show on the apple that could be potentially helpful later is just putting in the little details that we have over here. Now, these little details and little freckles, we'll call this for the apple. I don't know the terminology. One of these days, I promise I will check that out. But until then, I'm just going to put this above here, add a new layer. And I'm going to get something that's a little close to orange. So I'm going to look at what I have. And double click and just try and get something orange-ish. Going to darken that up a little bit to match what I have. Now, most likely, another thing that you could always do as well, if you think a shade of orange is too much, or any shade for that matter, You can always take the color that you have and just turn down the opacity, which is again right over here. We played around with this a little bit before when we were editing photos, but this really plays well here too. Now, a place that you can find some really cool brushes to work with this is if you go to the special effects brush, you'll see that there's some interesting presets that you have here, and you could just basically make sure you got the right layer here. Might want to choose a different brush. Oh yeah, make sure that when you're doing this that it doesn't say anything the likes of either mixer or anything else like that. Splatter I think would be good. There we go. Now it's happening. Cool. All right. So I'm going to turn down this brush a little bit because it's a bit on the big side. This is one of the reasons why different layers can be a huge help. Just clicking and dragging around. But I can add little specks here and there on my apple. And once again, I can use the smudge. Not sure why that's looking that way, but soft brush, and again I can basically just move these areas up, circle it around like so. Of course, it looks like I might still need to add a couple more choice elements. And I could use the brush to help out with some of those parts. Okay, so that's looking not too bad. We can still do some more with this, but also remember I could turn down the opacity a little bit too to blend this in. There we go. Now I'm a lot more happy with that. Okay, and then I could use the eraser to erase whatever is unnecessary. Because a couple of those splots got a little bit further than they should have. Okay, now just for the last part for the shadow, I'm going to just add a bit of a dark area over here. Again, use your layers for the best. Oh, almost forgot to rename my layer 1 to be Freckles. And using my soft brush, at least for now, I'm going to try and emulate that little shadow that I have there. So for that, again, you could either use the brush itself or you could use the pen tool and another method. But I think in this case, this isn't so difficult that I think that this brush should be fine. Just a regular brush and a mouse. It's not ideal as always, but I think this could work. And I'm putting this on the lowest layer so that it works a little bit nicer. Yeah, that looks okay, but I think we could do better. So I'm going to make this bigger. There we are. Ah, there we are. So if you're making shadows and you notice that there's a little bit of a fall off over here, use that to your advantage. And I'm just going to use the eraser, again, at a huge amount. And I'm going to erase anything that's unnecessary. Again, making sure that you have a huge amount of, rephrased, little hardness can add a pretty good amount of fall off to help you with this. Oop. Of course, it helps if you make sure that you have the right layer selected. I'm going to redo that. Must have accidentally undid the new layer I made for myself. Oh, no, there it is. Nope, that's But that's okay, because I could just make my new layer. It's at the bottom. I'll call this shadow. Again, as always, when in doubt, remember that undo's your friend. I would say if you learn anything from my lectures, and hopefully you learn a little bit more than this, undo's your friend. #1 golden rule. Hey, look at that. I was able to bring that back pretty easy. So I could still basically kind of maybe take a moment to darken this area up a little bit more, but this is the general gist of what I can do for a start. And I think I could still add some more green area over here. So I'll take a moment to do that. But use every tool at your disposal. There's no reason to not to. Excellent. All right. So the last part is I just would add a little bit of green to this. Again, I'm not worrying too much about details that much. But in this case, oh, by the way, one other thing that could be helpful, if you bring up your color picker, your little color area over here, you can actually, anything that you select beyond this, will be able to select your color, and then I can just bring this up a little bit to paint that. So I'm just going to bring this down a little bit more. And I'm going to try and keep that middle area this way. And I can use the smudge. Make sure I just turn this way down. But what you want to do, if you can, is basically spread this stuff out. If possible. Even if it goes outside the area, that's not a problem at all, because we can, that's what erasers are for. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of elbow grease, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience to get the look you're trying to get. One of the hardest things to kind of work with when you're an artist is having that patience, and a good mix between the two. So right now I'm just trying to get the edge of this to basically make that look a little bit nicer. And not too shabby. Again, it's a little bit rough, but with a little bit of time and patience we can fix that up. So yeah, most of the time I try and go for most of my stuff, I try and go for a middle color if possible, and then basically fix stuff up along the way. So again, try to get something similar to this. I'm sure with a little bit more time than, well, basically 30 minutes, you probably could get something looking pretty nice. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges of doing any digital painting is allocating the amount of time necessary to do what must be done. And in this case, we have a good start, but there's still stuff that can be done. Now, before anything else, I do want to take an opportunity to show you other methods of just focusing on shading and stuff like that. And I also want to, for those of you who might want to do your own inking for characters and comics and such, there's a little sheet I want to show everybody. So I'm going to save this for posterity's sake as Practice Apple. And I'll see if I could actually leave this picture available in case anyone wants to use this as a reference. So, all right, well, we'll end the video at this point because it is getting a little bit long. But again, we're going to make our next video, which is going to focus on different methods of blending and such. So hopefully you'll find that useful for yourself. Okay, talk to you soon.